Howdy, everybody, and welcome to another episode of the Okayest Trapper Podcast. As always, we are brought to you by a few key sponsors: Cryptech Clothing, Blokes Modern Men's Health, Mountain Tough Fitness, and Trapline Beard Oil, and both the Idaho and National Trapper Association. So do me a favor, go leave us a 5-star review on whatever platform you're tuning in from and use the promo codes in the show notes for some great discounts on all these wonderful brands. Now, my guest today is a true Midwesterner. He's a trapper through and through, both in life and professionally. And his YouTube page was a huge resource for me as I began my own trapping career. Coming to us by way of Missouri, Jinx, welcome to the show.
Hey, thanks for having me.
So I got to ask, real name, Jinx, like where did that come from?
Oh, my last name is Jenkins. So in high school, I was just naturally a tagline. A lot of people for short called me Jinx. So that's kind of how I got my YouTube channel, and I just kind of naturally go by Jinx since it's just kind of short for me.
Well, I was kind of disappointed your mama didn't after you popped out, be like, yep, that's a Jinx.
Yeah.
All right. Well, Jenkins, that works. That's good. But, the first question I always ask everyone on the show is to reach back in the piggy bank of your memories and tell me the first time you ever remember being exposed to trapping.
Absolutely. It would be wrong of me if I didn't bring up my mentor in this situation. I think everybody as a hunter can always look back to the first time they killed their first deer. I can remember it vividly, like it was yesterday. I think a lot of outdoorsmen probably feel the same. Where you were, just everything about it. Same way with my first turkey. I remember the first time I killed a first turkey, and just the amount of work that went into that and the pride of that. So to go back into my memory bank, I'm going to go back to my mentor. He was my great uncle. I just got this kind of a passion to learn trapping. I got it from him. I was in my younger 20s, and he kind of showed me the ropes. We had set out a line, or I had set out a line, and we were going to check some traps on farm ground that he had trapped as a kid. So there was a good 40-year age gap between me and my great uncle. But he was just a really good teacher. We were driving down in the old rusty red truck. We called it Old Red. It was a 1960s Chevy. I think it had more rust on it than it had red, but we called it Old Red. We were driving in on a CRP pasture, and I remember setting some traps down along the creek bottom there. And as we crested the top of the hill, you know what it's like when you're a brand new trapper, you're on the edge of your seat. You remember setting that last trap and you're just kind of keyed in. And I saw a little bit of movement, and I remember saying, "We got something." And then as we drove closer, and Old Red, and I could tell it was a bobcat. And that was the first bobcat I'd ever caught. My great uncle had never caught a bobcat. So it was really a first for the both of us, and we shared in that experience. And that was definitely one of those just key moments that I'll put in with that first deer I killed, that first turkey that I killed. And I think that for my great uncle, he got to share that experience, and I'm sure it was special to him as well. So,
well, that's awesome. That's a heck of a way to start a trapping career. You mentioned you were in your 20s, with your great uncle. It sounds like if there was a 40-year age gap, it was likely that he was kind of trapping during the peak fur boom of the late 70s and 80s. That monetary gain gives me a lot of credence for people who wanted to trap back then. But for you as a 20-something-year-old, what even drew you to even be curious? Was it just the outdoor recreation at the time, or did you have something else in mind?
Yeah, well, see, a lot of kids, when they grow up, they get into athletics, basketball, football, baseball. I mean, I liked playing baseball in the summer months, like swimming just like anybody else. But my true passion was hunting. I got that from my mom's side. My grandfather, he and his brother, they were big hunters. We got together during our rifle deer season every year in Missouri. It was a family thing. We didn't have a lot of acreage. We had maybe 300 acres. But you know how a lot of families, they come together during holidays like Thanksgiving and Christmas. our family got together during deer season. That was just kind of what we did. And my grandfather, he always had friends that he invited along, and we had nicknames we called each other, and it was just kind of that type of atmosphere that I just kind of grew up doing. That was my passion, and then later on in life, as I grew and I got into predator hunting a lot. I got into calling. I didn't have a lot of success, so I had this kind of this hunger and desire to kill more coyotes. And so when I kind of found out about trapping and through my great uncle, I was just hungry to learn. And that's pretty much what drove me to start trapping.
Well, even prior to that, you said the predator hunting. You mentioned turkey hunting too. Like in Missouri, I know there's quite a few coyotes. Like was the predator hunting too just like another outdoor challenge, or was there like you hear today there's a lot more emphasis on trapping as like a means to moderate predators like ground nesting critters like raccoons and things like that too. Was that at all a part of your equation, or was it just like the sport of predator hunting at the time?
I don't know. For men, I think we like to conquer things, and I mean, the more you read through publications or magazines, you think I just kind of got into. I just like to get into things, and I think that was probably a good way of describing it. It's almost like I go through phases where it's like I want to get into this and conquer this and learn this, and that was kind of one of those phases I was just kind of going through at the time. Now trapping is a way of life for me now, and it bled into so much more. And I just couldn't get enough of it, if that makes sense. It was my passion. So
Well, it is, but
it
I'm
still is.
curious too. So you roll up on that first bobcat, and I'm assuming it was in a foothold. So you probably dispatch it, you celebrate. You had already done so much hunting, predator hunting as well. What was it about trapping then? Because like clearly you've made a profession out of it, and we'll talk a lot about that. But like, what was different about trapping then that it really like seeped into your bloodstream versus like clearly hunting and predator hunting still is, but this has become a way of life. Like, what was the difference that you felt between the two?
Well, trapping is like an addiction. I mean, every every time you go out to set and check traps is like Christmas morning. You never really know what you're going to get. You got days where you catch a lot, and then you got days that are kind of humbling where you don't catch as much. It's challenging because you get to learn how to read sign and to look at sign and to set traps on sign, and then you learn different set making strategies. I really fell in love with studying the animal, how they travel, how they feed, and then just harvesting that animal, and then setting goals. I learned how to set goals to help motivate myself and just to become a better trapper. Uh, and a lot of people, they don't talk about trapper development. Um, and I've always tried to focus on becoming a better trapper, and that's kind of who I am and kind of what I look for.
Well, speaking of like the trapper development, so you get that bobcat. Did you have anything else on that same line that you went to check that day, or was that it? And then I'll have a follow-on question after you answer that.
Yeah, my great uncle and I, we always ran a mixed bag. We had a lake that was a pretty sizable private lake that was used for the watershed. And so we had full access to all of that at our fingertips. We set coon traps, we set for beaver, we caught otter, which was kind of a thing back then. You could sell an otter for $80, $100. That was pretty common. Our cats would get $50, $75. So, there was some motivation there, in that time frame to be a trapper, and we'd catch muskrats, anything that we wanted to do. We just kind of did what I would call a mixed bag, where we just enjoyed each other and we enjoyed what we were doing, and that's what I think made it fun.
Yeah, and then so I mean, clearly, growing up hunting, like the disadvantage I had getting into trapping later in life is I did not have years and years of, whether that's skinning out deer or any other big game animal and getting behind a knife on a smaller critter. for me was challenging at first, just from doing it well. What was your experience like out of the gate with all your critters? Like, had you had pretty good knife handling skills? Like, what was that learning curve like for you, not just on the trap line when you got started, but the fur shed?
Well, I had my great uncle, so everything he grew up doing, and learning how to do it the proper way. We went to a lot of conventions together. We were kind of blessed to have the NTA was for several years. We had the NTA that was close by, and then the Fur Takers was always close by. The following year, and so for several years we went to a lot of conventions. I went to a lot of demos. So there was always outlets there to learn from. I read a lot of books. My great uncle was always giving me books to read. So you get kind of like a giant mixed bag of a lot of teachers, and then you kind of have to differentiate, the Western teachers from the Eastern teachers, and what's going to work in my area, and that can be frustrating, I'd say, for a lot of newer trappers, because if you ask 10 guys how to do something, you're probably going to get 10 different responses, But if you've got one or two guys that really, really know their stuff and they catch big numbers and they're putting up for well, those are usually the type of people I like to learn from. Not being the others are wrong. It's just you just kind of learn to pick and choose what outlets you want to learn from. So
yeah, and I think that experimentation helps because, like you said, what works out west might not work in the Midwest, might not work out east. And yeah, you mentioned west and east, which is where a lot of like the education comes from, and you're smack dab in the middle. So you got to figure out how you play that card the right way.
Oh, it's a big deal. And I tried to learn from a lot of the Midwestern guys. Red O'Hearn, he's about 40 miles north of me. So I naturally just gravitated towards Mike Red O'Hearn. He was a big raccoon trapper. Anybody in Iowa, they know that. There was a guy by the name of Bernie Behringer. He wrote a lot of books. Gravitated towards a lot of the stuff that he wrote. I had so many different guys that I really, really liked to learn from. And then in time, when I started taking professional instruction, then you start to learn, what are myths, because there's definitely a lot of myths in the trapping,
All right, well, I'm gonna put
industry.
you on the spot then, Jinx. What? Because I'm curious too. What is the most common myth in the trapping industry that maybe was debunked for you by some of the professional training that you got?
I'd say scent control for coyotes, hands down, number one.
As like, and you probably don't need as much as is being preached out there.
Well, that's a dividing topic. A lot of people really, really, really believe either way. The reason why I could say it's a myth is because I've learned from about 5 different instructors they're professionals. I've taken 3 professional schools for just canine trapping. I took the Fur Takers College. I learned from guys that are putting 500 plus coyotes. Those are the guys I'm really taking instruction from.
Mm-hmm.
And every one of them, a lot of times they're not wearing gloves. They're generally never ever wearing a kneeling pad. They could spit on the side of their sets, doesn't seem to bother them. And I kind of grew up learning you got to make your set a certain way. You got to have certain gloves on. You got to take those gloves off and put on different gloves to put on your bait or your lure so that you don't cross contaminate. And it's like you got to wear rubber boots, or you got to wear waders is another one that's real popular. And it's like, once you kind of like learn that that's not necessary, this huge load comes off your shoulders. Then you could just like, oh, well, so-and-so's not doing that. And then this person's not doing that. And that person's not doing that. Then that to me is how I miss about how I debunk myths. So
I like that. And, I can speak from experience because I've gone through the full like gamut of, I think especially newer trappers like myself, relatively speaking, right? You go through starting off where you're not doing much scent control, and then you analyze what you're doing, and then you might go to the opposite end and you're like, I'm not doing enough, and you go full bore and scent control, and then you get tired of it. And what's funny is when I would go through those oscillations,
Right.
oftentimes I would be doing like the multi-glove, ozone box, all sorts of stuff for these like, coyotes and wolves. And then I'd get lazy and be like, you know what? I'm just going to throw this set in the ground. I'm going to expect nothing out of it because I have scent all over it. And then that would be the one that would catch a critter.
Yeah.
And you'd be like, okay, well, it's never, nothing is sacred. There are no sacred cows in trapping.
Yeah. And, we have a lot of trial and error. A lot of times guys, when they first start trapping, and they'll do certain things a certain way. And you might ask them, why are you doing it that way? Well, it's because I caught a coyote doing it this way, and it's like, oh, okay. And I always say, you want to keep that because that's what confidence has taught you. I think as a trapper, one of the most important traits you can have is confidence. If you're not confident in what you're doing, then you're really in a lot of trouble.
Yeah.
Because the critters are going to teach you real quickly that it can be a humbling experience. But and if you are humbled, always go back to your teachers and just find out what works and stick with it.
Have you ever had a moment, and I'm asking because I've gone through this, where you build that confidence in whatever critter you're pursuing? For me, it was beaver specifically, where I just felt like I couldn't miss, right, for a while. I was just keyed in. And then I went through a season where it felt like I couldn't catch a beaver to save my life. And I don't feel like I had changed much of anything. Like, have you had those experiences throughout your career at all?
Oh,
and
yeah.
What do you attribute that to?
Well, pressure sometimes will cause them, to avoid your sets. You mentioned beaver. Beavers can become educated, especially if somebody else has already tried to trap them. And there's going to be those times where it's going to be a humbling process. Usually, I think persistence will pay off in whatever you're trapping. Because I think everybody really struggles with not catching at some point. Even the professionals, I really struggled that when I first started. Say, I took Ed Schneider's Kansas Mastery course out in Kansas. One of my biggest questions was, what do you do when you don't catch? Because there'll be days like, I think moon cycle is a big one for me in my area. The full moon. I mean, I just pull traps, and you kind of learn that sort of stuff. But my one of my questions was some of these bigger trappers is like, what happens on stretches where you don't catch? And it's just a humbling process. And I think as long as you keep doing what you're doing, you're going to bounce right out of it. And sometimes you may have to move into new areas. I think that's kind of important to think about as well. As long as you're moving into new areas, you're going to catch new fur. But I think, in time, I think it'll come back around because they always struggle with that too.
Yeah, universal problem, I guess. But going back to like just your time frame and your story. So you're in 20s, you start trapping with your great uncle. You start putting up fur. You kind of do like the grab bag. You said you're trapping whatever you can. You're learning a lot of things. At what point were you like, I want to make this a profession? Because you are a full-time trapper by trade, correct?
That's correct. Yeah, I've been blessed to be full-time since 2000. So I'm about 18 years. I always, once I really kind of caught that bug, I mean, that was really kind of my dream, was to somehow turn this into a profession. But it was always kind of one of those things that I always felt like would never happen. I was the type of kid that when I was in high school, I didn't know what I wanted to be when I grew up. Even in college, I did 2 years of college, still didn't know what I wanted to major in. I was kind of I worked hard growing up. I found out my dad taught me how to work hard. I had $7,000 in the bank when I graduated in high school. I had a part-time job at the grocery store there locally. I worked in the grocery store industry 11 years. I was a manager at the time, about when I was in the 20s. And I tried to, here was the thing. I tried to quit my job one day on a Sunday, and the number 2 guy, he talked me out of it. He said, no, don't quit your job, stay here. And I was really kind of getting tired of the politics. Because when you work retail, they really want you to move on, go to other stores. And there was kind of a dog eat dog thing. You know, I got new managers coming in, and there was always some sort of politics floating around. Here was the thing. I tried to quit my job 2 weeks to the very day. The manager was starting, there was another manager there. He was starting some rumor. I just didn't like it. I was fed up with it. I just threw my keys. I said, you know what? I quit. And I walked out, and I showed up back to work the next day just to talk to the boss. I knew I was in the principal's office kind of thing. And I told him kind of what had happened in a nutshell. I was pretty much finished anyways. But he handed me my pink slip. It was quit without leave. And he told me, he said, here's the thing that really got to me. He told me, he said, you are a really, really good worker. But he said, until that trapping thing came into play, then it was just like, you know, not so much.
So he knew enough that you were doing that on the side that he felt that was.
Yeah. See, the thing of it was, I was supposed to be at work at 6 o'clock in the morning. I worked till 4 in the afternoon. But what I was doing was I was running my trap line at 3 in the morning. When I got off at 4, I had maybe 2 hours of daylight at best. So I'm trapping, and then I'm skinning for 2-3 hours every night, you know? Yeah. But the funny thing of that is, 2 years later, so this was 2005 in August, my wife just had a baby the month before, and I had a 3-year-old at the time. So, I mean, I had responsibilities, and I knew better. But 2 years later, after I started my business, I got a phone call, and it was the very manager that told me that I just got into trapping too much. He had bats. I solved his bat problem. And he was really kind of a good manager. He would at least level with me. But that's one thing I liked about him. And he said, you know, I didn't really understand why you left, and I didn't really understand why you just love trapping so much. But he says, now I get it. It's like I turned something that I loved into a passion. I was good with people, and that's kind of where I'm at right now.
And so, I mean, you're gonna have to forgive me. Like, I want to dig deeper because, you know, like right now I'm in that stage of life where I'm a father of like young kids. You know, stability is always coveted. So like, I understand the amount of passion you would have had to walk away from, you know, like the stability of your day job. What was it like when you did you immediately walk away from that experience and be like, well, I guess I'm a full-time trapper now? Like, what was it like as far as like getting like your nuisance license? Was that a process at the time? Like, did you know about that? Or like, did you just like go around and start asking people like, hey, you got a problem skunk or raccoon I can trap?
Right. Well, I'm a thinker and I'm a planner. So I'm almost, well, I know I'm a micromanager, you know. I did a lot of research before I actually stepped out. You know, I tried the factory thing a while. There's a lot of little side jobs, but I did a lot of studying. I spent time at, you know, the Chamber of Commerce. You know, I asked a lot of questions. I was involved in a trade association, got some training through them. Later on, I bought into a franchise system, and then later on, I spun off from them. So I had to really invest in myself. You know, when you first start a nuisance business, it's not easy. You're really just trying to make ends meet. There are those roller coaster moments where you got a lot of money in the bank and you're like, wow, I'm doing really good. And then when you're first starting out, you're investing that back into materials and assets, advertising. You know, for the first 5 years, it was really, really tough. I mean, I can't tell you how tough it was. My wife, she quit her job. So I was fully invested. That first year, here I was a full-time trapper now. I was going to go set a line, and we had a huge ice storm. And I'm like, how am I supposed to feed my family when I can't go to work? You know, and that's the sort of stuff that you just have to dig deep and get through it. And our faith dragged us through that. And I think my wife and I were still together. So, but we had to learn.
Anything.
What's that?
But that's as big of an achievement of anything going through like those tough times.
Yeah, she had to trust me, and I had to just wing everything. I had to learn a lot of trial and error. I guess they would say that I went to the school of hard knocks, but I developed a really good system, and it works. And the same people that first started working for 18 years ago, they still use me today, and they're friends. So, uh, and then now of course we're financially doing really well, and that just comes from just working hard and putting putting a lot of sweat equity in everything.
Well, I think a lot of people listening to this, whether they're new to trapping or have been trapping for a while, I think everybody at some point, myself included, thinks, man, I should go into like nuisance trapping. Like that should be my full-time job. What was your biggest surprise going from someone who was doing it like recreationally? Like we'll call it recreationally. Like, of course, you were selling fur and everything else like that. What was your biggest shock going into the business of trapping?
The most commonly asked question from guys just starting out is they want to ask what to charge. That's always the first question, and that should really be one of the questions in 10. There should be a bunch of questions you need to ask yourself, and every market area is totally different. I can't charge what guys are charging an hour and a half south of me in larger market areas. There's guys I'm really good friends with. They make a boatload of money doing the same work in their areas. So you really learn a lot about what you can charge, what you're worth. I don't tell people I'm cheap. I tell people I offer quality service. Of course, if you want a quality service, then you're going to pay for it. Just like Ford and Chevy, and then there's the Cadillac, and you are really what you're worth, and you kind of have to figure that out. You can't jump right into the business thinking that you're a franchise and charge franchise costs if you have no training. You've really got to invest in professional training if you want, to have a premium price. The same thing is you just kind of figure out what your image is. I learned through a lot of the franchise training about how to sell, how to market your product, which my product is myself mostly. You learn that I'm a trapper by trade, but at the same time, I'm a wildlife control operator when I put on my business hat. The type of people that I'm working for are CEOs, bankers, lawyers. They're very respectful people in the community. They have a problem. I'm there to solve it. I got a clean truck, clean uniform. Always shake their hand, tell them yes sir, no ma'am. I'm very old fashioned, and I think that goes a long way in the world that we live in. And I think probably if you'll find out a lot of times, if you take care of people and you believe in the golden rule, that'll go a long ways in business and in life. So, and anything, and it doesn't have to be the trapping industry; it's any industry. The most successful people you'll know are the people that get to know their clientele by name, and it's just always full circle. So
yeah, I love that. I mean, and it's that grit and resilience coupled with, I grew up in the South. There's something to be said for manners and just like that appearance and presentation that you do. Like you said, whether you're a wildlife control operator or whether you're a lawyer or whatever, it's a universal rule.
Absolutely. Yep.
And then, okay, so you had mentioned something about the manager from the grocery store you were at, and he had a bat problem. So this is something that kind of blows my mind. And this is one of the things that kind of took me off, my little day fantasy of being a wildlife control operator. The other types of critters that you're having to deal with that, like, on a normal trap line, you're bound by the regulations of your state and what fur bearing critters are there. Like Idaho, I have a lot. Other states, there's fewer. But then when you're a wildlife control operator, you might be dealing with bats. You might be dealing with, other critters you would otherwise never come across on your trap line. So like, how do you bridge that gap? And like, what was your first like critter that you got a call on to, deal with that you were like, Oh, wow. This is new territory for me.
Oh yeah. Well, I mean, it goes back to that trapping aspect, and what we talked about earlier is like I really like to learn
Mhm.
new things. It can be very challenging when you set yourself up as a professional. If the phone's ringing, snakes, guess what? You're doing snakes.
Uh-huh.
I mean, if the phone's ringing bats, guess what? You're doing bats. See, I set my business up in a trapper's. I thought I was going to do a lot of raccoons.
Mhm.
And I thought maybe I'd do a lot of squirrels and skunks. I was known as the skunk man for several years. But I never really thought, bats, moles, snakes, dead animals. It's like, I mean, these are all new concepts to me as a trapper. And I just had to really buckle down and learn those things. I mean, when we talk about bats, it's like it's a whole new ballgame. Now you got to have a construction background,
Mm.
maybe lift experience. I mean, I had some bad jobs. I literally had to have 3 ladders to get to where I needed to be. It's like I never really learned that. You gotta get the ladders off the truck, and you gotta figure that sort of stuff out. There's definitely a learning curve involved in it, and you definitely don't want to go about it lightly.
Yeah. So would you do like, so let's say your phone rings and it's snakes or bats, like those first few years, did you just like jump into it, or you were like, hold on, I got to Google this for a minute and see like what the best approach is? Or like, was it a
Yeah,
little bit of both?
I'll be flat out honest with you. Most of that stuff I hated doing,
Yeah.
but because my wife quit her job, I had to feed my family. And I mean, the farmers around here, they've got that saying that says when it's time to make hay, you make hay. And if the phone's ringing, I'm taking every call that comes in because those first 5 years, it could be your mortgage payment.
Yep.
So you just kind of have to learn. Pigeons was another thing. I was getting calls for pigeons, and I had to get certified in Bird Be Gone, and Bird Barrier was another one. I was certified in their products and had to learn how to. I just there was just a lot of information for just a trapper, right?
Do you think so how did you balance your, I'll call it traditional trap line too, especially in like the early years? And do you think like just that nonstop exposure to having to learn new critters and patterns made you a better, quote, traditional trapper too? Did it kind of like bleed back into that? Or was that such a backseat while you were trying to get the business off the ground that, you were just tackling everything?
Well, I mean, 18 years now in, I mean, I've kind of got a routine. I
Mhm.
know when the phone will ring. I'll know about what time. I'll do a lot of. I could track a lot of my paperwork. I used to do that, but you just get kind of comfortable in what you're doing.
Mhm.
So I'll take off and I'll do other things when it starts to slow down. I have my YouTube stuff. I've got about 3 months of ADC stuff. The last few years since I started taking professional instruction, I grew my business into taking animal damage control stuff and doing the nest raider stuff. I work for the levee system. It's 16 miles of levee, and there's always something to do. And then on top of that, I've got my YouTube stuff where I'm filming and I'm traveling, filming, and then I have my goals that I want to set for myself and my own trapper development. So there really is always a lot to do. I mean, it never ceases to amaze me the amount of stuff I could get into all at once. Uh, but that's what makes life tolerable, I suppose.
I mean, we're talking here on a video that will go on YouTube. Like, I'm always impressed by the guys who are out filming their actual trapping, because even cutting a static podcast like this and cutting a reel and uploading it, like, I don't think people recognize how much effort goes into any sort of, we'll call it a creative endeavor, especially when it comes to video, audio, etc. It's a
Right.
lot of work. And like
It
the
is.
work that I do is probably an eighth of what you guys who are out traveling, filming. Like, I go out on my trap line, I'm like, screw taking a camera. Like, I got enough
Yeah.
work ahead of me without it. So What was the motivation for you there? And like, what have you found to be the most fulfilling part of, being able to educate, people like myself and others on
Right.
some of the stuff you're doing?
So a lot of people don't know this. When you see guys that are on the big screen, they think maybe they're out to make a big name, maybe they're out to make a bunch of money. My sole motivation was my mentor, my great uncle. He had died. This is my 7th year in YouTube, so it was about 7, 8 years ago. He passed away, and to be quite honest with you, I had this feeling like it wasn't fair that I had him as a mentor. I really kind of felt like maybe I could fill that role. And I just kind of, that was the whole purpose and the whole reason why I started Trapping with Jinx in my YouTube channel. I just thought that I could use that as a ministry to reach other people for trapping, to share my passion, to help people along their way, and to also make it kind of entertaining. Um, there's a lot of work that goes into it. For every one YouTube video you watch, I spend 2 hours editing. I usually spend an hour on the thumbnail. Like you said earlier, I mean, when you're running a trap line, you're trapping all day long, and then you skin and fur, and then now I've got to cut a video, But I do enjoy it, and I think probably YouTube doesn't pay the bills, and I get it. It's no big deal. It doesn't bother me. But the one thing that I really enjoy doing is I like to go to conventions. I like to talk to people, other trappers. I really like to try to be that guy that's the friend, the people that people could say hello to. I really get a big kick out of it when guys show up and they say, "Hey, um, I watch your channel. I was in the hospital. I couldn't trap. Um, Thank you." And that right there is my payment. I mean, just having one guy that says, "Hey, I watch your channel. I really enjoyed it." That to me is worth it. So I could get a lot of hate, and I do, but when I get little stuff like that, that's my attaboys. So
Yeah, you and I talked a little bit before, but I agree with that. Like, it's the same thing. Like, whether it's YouTube, whether it's books, it's funny how outsized the voices can be negatively in a lot of different pursuits, whether it's writing, whether it's YouTube. But it's a little bit of the man in the arena mentality for me. It's like that stuff's hard. And, if you have the idea for it and you have the passion for it, and I agree with the mentorship, I think it's so great that there's so many YouTubers out there that are sharing their knowledge, especially for people like me who are coming up in the digital era, who might not have access to a mentor like your great uncle, and that we can do that digitally. I think it's great. But you're right. Like, the things that do keep me motivated are same as you. Like, it's not every day, but man, like when you wake up one morning and you either have that one comment or you have that one private message that's just like, "Hey, I really appreciate what you're doing." Like, God, that makes it so worth it.
yeah, and I have several guys that message me, and I help them through their season. And I mean, I get kind of I get to share in their joy of them catching, and it's kind of fun. Um, I enjoy it, so I'll keep doing it.
Well, I got three questions. I'm gonna add a special one for you, which I don't normally ask people, but I'll give you all three, and you can take them in whatever order you want. But the first is the biggest mistake you've ever made on your trap line, biggest mistake you've ever made in the fur shed, and special for you is what's the biggest mistake you've ever made in trying to make a YouTube video?
Okay. Well, the biggest mistake I've ever made on my trap line. Well, I mean, we really beat up ourselves. I think that's probably, I think, my biggest mistake is that I overthink. When you're not catching, you overthink. You might try to add in extra sets. You might try a new bait or a new lure that you've never tried before, and then you're not having any success with it. I think that would probably be my biggest mistake as a trapper is just overthinking. Uh, just keeping things simple now, using the same bait, same lure when I'm doing my coyote trapping stuff, because that's kind of my passion right now. But I think that's probably my biggest mistake is I overthink. And I could still find myself falling into that trap where I just overthink. And I know now that experience will teach me that it's just a thing, and just keep plugging away, and you're gonna find out it all works out. Probably the first shed one. So my first shed is in my basement. I have a ranch style home. It's a split level. The basement's concrete poured, so I do everything underneath my house,
I
which
can see
is
where
not
this
a.
is going.
You can see where I'm going on this, right? All right, so I hit a mink gland once, and if you ever hit a mink gland, it's no fun.
Mm.
It just took that one time for me to realize I shouldn't have done that. And the funny thing is, when you do things down in the basement, the wife finds out upstairs. So I learned my lesson that day. And most normally, if I catch a mink, I'm doing it outside on the tailgate. That was the second one.
How was your wife on that one? What she did you hear her screaming from downstairs, or did it
Oh, as soon
permeate
as
a
I
little
hit it, yeah, as soon as I hit that, she knew. She knew. I mean,
Well,
there
we got to
wasn't
give a
any.
shout out to Jinx's wife for
There you go. Yep.
sticking through everything, literal thick and thin.
Yep. And then what was the third question about the nuisance?
No, the third was about YouTube and like making videos. Like, what was your biggest mistake early on in filming content for YouTube?
That's a good question. I'm still learning in YouTube. In 7 years in YouTube, you think that you would know a thing or two. Uh, Probably my biggest mistake is I don't want to say I try to be somebody else, but when you watch people, people can influence you. And then I learned probably the first season or two, I learned that I needed to be myself.
Mm.
I think that people will genuinely gravitate towards people that are real. Um, I think if I create content that I myself would like to watch, I think I'll end up with better content. And in the end, I just it just all comes together better. I feel good about some of the content I created. I like to create. I found that out early on. As this is just a creative outlet for me. But yeah, I think that's probably my biggest mistake is I was trying to uh, be somebody I wasn't. And I know that's kind of diving a little bit deep, but if you're in the YouTube business or if you're in creating anything, just create content that you yourself would like to watch and be yourself.
I can't agree with you more on that. And I think everybody falls in that trap. And I think it comes from a lack of confidence. Like, I think it's flattery and it's emulating. Like, you try to emulate what you see as successful, and it usually takes doing that and realizing like, oh, like I just need to be me. And like
Yeah.
maybe that person was them, but that's not me. And I've fallen in that trap too, like early, Instagram and YouTube, like, you feel like, oh, well, so and so's doing this, I should too. And then you start to build your confidence a little bit, and you're like, yeah, I don't need to do that. I can do what Zach wants to do, or I can do what Jinx wants to do. And again, that ends up resonating more with people. It might not reach the same audience, but is reaching the right audience.
Another thing with the YouTube, I kind of noticed this early on. A lot of guys will create content at a certain time frame, like September. Everybody's doing their traps, getting their traps out. And my son one time he said, I created this video. I just published it one time, and my son says, Dad, they're copying something that you just did. I said, no, I know it kind of looks like it, but we all have kind of the same ideas all at once, and it's not something that was done on purpose. And I think that could sometimes be a trap, especially for guys that are trying to find their own lane, as they drive, kind of thing. Most guys aren't there to take from other people, and I think that's probably something that has to be said every once in a while because you get kind of the idea, you know. But
Yeah, I agree. It's hard, and it's such a niche thing. And like you said, all of our seasons relatively align, and most content comes out during the season as stuff goes. So like you said,
right.
fall starts to come, you start to boil traps. Oh, surprise! There's a lot of videos about trap boiling,
That's
or
right.
making bait, making lure, and it's what happens when you're in the off season, right? You're doing all those other little odds and ends that make good content, but often can match up with other people. So fully agree with you there. From your perspective, having been a career-long trapper, what do you think most people misunderstand about trapping? And for you, I'm going to say, what do you think most people misunderstand about being a wildlife control operator?
Um, Most people, probably the most misunderstood thing about trapping, because a lot of my clients that I deal with, I tell them, I fur trap during the winter months, and I tell them I work for the levee, and, I give them a lot of beneficial stuff. A lot of the general public will never really see the benefits of trapping, nowhere near as much as we do, or biologists, or, a lot of your professionals that are on the front lines investing their time and resources and managing the overabundance. That's pretty much a good way of describing what we're doing is we're trying to manage the overabundance. It's regulated, it's humane, and it's legal, of course. And nature really benefits from us having us out there doing it. Most people can really get on board with that. I don't usually get a lot of hate, but I see a large part of the pitfalls of not doing trapping. I've got a farmer. He'll call me up. He's got 40 acres of bean field flooded from beavers. He can't plant underneath the water. I work a levee system at 16 miles. They hire me to get rid of the coyotes that are digging into the levee. If we ever had a flood, those people are going to benefit from having a trapper around. Little things like that. Nobody that I've ever remembered after getting 100 bats out of their attic says they want them back. you know, Same way with snakes. It's like, you sure you don't want your snakes back? They're going to benefit by having a trapper out there, getting rid of that sort of stuff, and doing the ethical thing, the thing that your state wants you to do. Little stuff like that is, I think it goes a long way with a lot of people. They really realize and respect the need. Most nuisance animals that you do just make lousy pets. So they definitely need us around.
I like that. And then just like with your crystal ball, what do you see as the future of trapping?
I think that, a lot of guys, what I want to say is, as long as I've been trapping, the biggest thing that motivates people to trap is money. That I can remember. A lot of guys are jumping into doing skunks now. Well, the fur harvesters, I think their average at the last auction was $85-$90 a skunk pelt. So now you're seeing a lot of these state demos are doing skunks. So there's still that mentality of jumping on board. There's definitely an overabundance. But what I want to say about trapping that I've noticed, I've offered a lot of nest raider services during the last 2-3 years. I think there's a huge draw in that direction. I've got guys in the Midwest that are working their whole lives. They're CEOs of big companies. They're buying land and they're managing it for deer and turkey and upland birds. And the problem is when you've got coyotes that are worthless for the fur, and you've got raccoons are the same. You have this huge overabundance. If you have too many of the predator species, you're not going to have the desirable sporting species. And I think there's a huge market there for trappers. You see guys that'll hire people like myself to go out and trap for nest raiders. Get rid of that overabundance so that they can have the deer, the turkey, and the small game. So if they don't, they can have all the food plots they want, but if they don't get rid of the predators, then they're not going to have the numbers they want. So I think there's going to be a huge market in that direction.
That's awesome. And then, so I do a lightning round. Well, really just 2 questions at the very end. So we're already coming up here on an hour. So, a lifetime as a sportsman in the woods. That's you. What's the wildest experience you've ever had in the woods?
Yeah. There was a time about a year or so ago, and they're not real wild, but my son and I, we were deer hunting in a blind, and something was going on with a turkey, and I heard a lot of thrashing. And I told my son, I think, be ready. I think a bobcat is getting that turkey. Oh. And we watched for a while. And it actually was I think it was a hawk that was attacking a turkey. that was pretty wild. I was bow hunting one time. I like to watch the squirrels. One of them was going across a tree limb, and he missed the tree limb. So that was a little different. I got three of them for you. So here's a third one. I was dove hunting, and I had my Mojo dove decoy out there, and I think it was another red-tailed hawk. He did a Stuka bomb and nailed that Mojo decoy. That was pretty wild. I have I have more in the nuisance side of things.
Well, hit me with some of those. I want to
Those
get
might actually be kind of fascinating. I took a raccoon out of a $30,000 radio transmitter one time. Got a phone call. Guy said, I got a raccoon and a radio transmitter. They've got all that electrical equipment. He says it's worth about $30,000. Now just don't mess in the electrical wiring. I was like, great. That was a challenging experience.
How'd you do it? I mean, like, was it kind of like that video or like that kids game Operation? Like you're trying to get something in there without touching any of the sides?
Yeah, he got what they call nighty-night fluid, where they just go to sleep.
Yep.
So I was able to euthanize him in between, and I just pulled him out. That was pretty wild. A lot of snake stuff. I did a dead animal one once. That was interesting. The homeowner called. I think it was a guy in the pest control industry, and he went through a finished basement, all the drywall, and he just hit holes all the way through the bottom of it. And I knew that the dead animal wasn't in the basement. It was actually outside, underneath a concrete stoop.
Oh, wow.
And the smell permeated the basement. That was pretty wild. I usually get a lot of them through. I'm probably taking up too much of your time now. But.
No, you're not. No, these are the ones that make me excited because
Oh yeah.
different things.
Usually, a lot of times when you work for property management, they always like to do things cheap. At least that's been kind of my experience. Unless you get a really good one, they like to hire you and they just don't care. But usually they go through their handyman service first. Well, I was working for a shopping center that had multiple shopping, stores there, and they had a raccoon that was up in the ceiling. Long story short, what they did was they blocked off the entrance. And they left the raccoon inside the attic area, and so a lot of the false ceiling and stuff, and a lot of damage on the inside of the store. And you see that every once in a while, and you think probably would have saved you a lot of money if you just would call me first.
Well, there's a lesson in there for everybody listening. You're a specialist before you try to solve a problem by yourself.
My favorite one are the snakes. I used to do a lot of snakes, first starting out especially, and I had a guy that called me, and it's always the guys for some reason that are just terrified of snakes. But this guy was 6 foot tall. He had his mother-in-law's house that sat vacant for years. He saw one snake skin in the living area of the house, and they were trying to finish it. And so I did the inspection, and this was a ranch style house with a concrete poured basement, and it had a crawl space area you just kind of look into. Mm-hmm. And when I'm doing my inspection, I look over the whole house, and I poked my head in there, and I looked in my flashlight, and I could see a lot of snakes in there. Huh. And the guy was standing right next to me, and he said, "Did you see anything?" I kind of looked at him. I was just like, yeah, there's some snakes in there. And I turned around to look back in there, and he was gone, like literally gone. Yeah, 6 foot tall. He just left. He left me.
How many snakes were in there?
The funny thing of it is, if I'm doing an inspection, if I see a snake, I go and I do everything I could possibly do to get that snake. So I went to crawl in, and originally I know there was at least one or two in the very back, and I went to crawl in. I'm crawling on dirt. And I got about halfway through, and I'm grabbing a snake here. I'm grabbing a snake here. I think I had 3 or 4 by the time I even got to the 2 that I saw. And I literally had them all in my hands.
What were they? What kind of snakes were
they? Well, on this one, it was a lot of black snakes, but I had pretty much a lot of the non-venomous, the racers, There was some snakes I had to look up. It was really kind of weird. That one snake skin ended up being like 65 snakes by the time I was done. So he was pretty happy.
Yeah, I bet.
Yeah,
Especially if he's that scared of them.
yeah, that was kind of one of those things that are a little out of the box, but um, it was good money at the time, so I didn't mind doing it.
That's awesome. So I always end on a hypothetical, and since you're in YouTube, I figured I'd do one a little bit more towards that end of the spectrum. So it's a would you rather. So would you rather only be allowed to use one camera angle for all of your videos? You know, say like a fixed pole cam, any of that, but only one angle forever.
Okay.
Or you can use any gear and angles you want, but you have to edit every video in 30 minutes or less.
Oh, okay. Well, that's a tough one, because I researched your channel and and you definitely threw me a curveball there. So, I don't like editing as much, so I'm just gonna go with the one camera angle. Um, you gotta almost love to edit, and I haven't found that passion to edit, so I'm going with the one camera angle. I'm sorry.
That's fair. That's fair.
Yeah,
Well, people are gonna have to get that one up the nose shot forever with
yeah,
Jinx. But man, I really appreciate it. I'm glad we were able to do this. I learned a lot, and I know everybody listening did too. But where can people learn more about you? Obviously, your YouTube channel. We'll put that in the show notes as well. Are you going to be at any conventions or anything? Just let people know where
yeah.
they can find out more.
Absolutely. I'm on YouTube, Trapping with Jinx. Look me up. I'm also on Rumble. You can find me on Fur Taker TV. That's Mark Steck's platform. I'm also on PPO TV through Roku. You can get that on demand as well. On Facebook, Instagram, and I will be at a lot of conventions, most of which are usually in the Missouri, Iowa area. I know there's a demo I'll be doing at the Missouri convention here coming up. And just reach out and say hi. That's the main thing, is always try to make friends. And I enjoy listening about other people's trapping experiences.
Awesome. Well, I appreciate it. And for everybody listening, we'll catch you on another episode of the Okayest Trapper.
All right. Thank you.